'74 was a big flood where it actually ran for 18 months, as I remember, even if it was a very slight trickle over the causeway. Again, the longest flowing time on record. But I remember the students had a term, like I said, is it going to run a banker? And they said, it'll run a banker, sir. And they used the expression banker. Banker just meant bank to bank. Banker meant it went right up to the tops and over a bit. And it's the only time I've ever heard that expression was back in those early 70s when the local students and the Aborigines used that doubling up of the word. The flooding historically, there seems to have been a flood on record that was probably one about 1780 as best I can try and determine it. It's long pre-European here. And there's another one that must have been about 1840, I think, where there's a little bit of evidence for a severe drought just before then. But there's debris down at Heavy Tree Gap that I pointed out to a lady called Burke, who was an American lady doing survey work, and told her about this old reference of a white person had recorded that the Aborigines had said there was a big flood that caused them to climb up on the ranges, and that flood she determined, and the determination by the old white fella second-hand account but derived from the Aboriginal people, was that it must have been well above the level of the present railway line and road through the gap. And I reckon there's certain trees and debris. I went down and looked at it all before this lady called Burke did it, Mary Burke, and we determined a similar place. There's an old dead tree up there that's probably a good indicator where the flood debris left enough soil and this tree grew, I think. But you're looking at something like 3 to 4 metres above the present level. There's another fellow called Jeff Pickup did a lot of research here on behalf of CSIRO, and he was an expert on what are called slack water deposits. And if you think of the water coming down from the Todd and the Charles and the Chinaman's Creek and all the local creeks in Alice Springs, and it can't get through the gap because of the immense volume coming down, then it builds up, and that's why Alice Springs will go under. It builds up eddies and it deposits soil on the side of the gap closest to Alice Springs, and there's a very large white sand deposit just near Jessie Gap which has been quarried, but they are deposits from these immense floods of different eras, and they indicate that about 400 years ago, these are very rubbery dates, but 400, 800, 12, about every 400 years, sometimes it's going to be 600 or something like that, you get a flood of such volume that we can't even remotely envisage it, so that the entirety of Alice Springs would be underwater. Every single house, including ours, which is on the slightly rising ground, you'd have only the so-called Snob Hill houses and a couple of those out on Larapinta where they're built up on the little hills there would be the only ones that would be free from the water. The Coolabahs here, if you look at the Coolabah swamp area, look at the farthest out Coolabahs and take that as all flooded river, you're going way up past the YMCA area in town. I mean, discussing this with you can't envisage if you don't live in Alice Springs, but those Coolabahs are a very good indicator. We've got them, if you think of them, you've got them here. You've also got very big old red gums. Again, they need their feet in water, and they are right at, there's none right at the Stralo Centre. People get confused about that, but across opposite, in a house opposite, there's an enormously big old one that's almost fallen down with an enormous butt on it, and there's a couple of chopped down, sawn down trees where you've got the stumps down a road just opposite. They have to have good water, and their feet are way down in water somewhere, but when they were building the Stralo Centre and other big developments in town, I've always gone along and I've taken photographs of where you get normal sand development, then you get a big line of coarse gravel, and that indicates some big runoff flood from the local hills, and you get enormous runoff. And you've had some huge floods of the past that you can see every time you get a big development in Alice Springs where there's a pit dug. You get this fine edges to it. You can really see where these big floods of the past have been. You can't readily date them, but this Mary Burke did dating on them.